What's up, guys? Welcome to the first episode of the DevineCast. It is myself, Travis, with Jeffrey here.
What up?
Um,
What up?
we're just gonna try to do the most generic Lorcana podcast we can do and talk about competitive play. I don't really know where we're gonna take it after these first few episodes, but we're just gonna wing it and see where we can go. I just wanted to introduce myself a little bit and talk about like where I am as a player and what I'm trying to do. I personally have gone to 2 DLCs. I did very well at Dallas, got top 200. I choked top 128 by one game. It was pretty unfortunate and played a ton of Ruby M. It was awful, but I enjoyed it a lot. I learned a lot. At Vegas, I took Blurple, and it was a terrible decision. I had a terrible time. um, Always gonna go with my gut and play what I want to play from now on. I learned that massively in stride after playing in some bigger events now. Pretty much, I'm just trying to play as many big events as I can. I know both of us have some 1Ks and 2Ks lined up for the season, so hopefully we can get that done and hopefully get some top cuts because we are choke artists at the big events. So
All right.
definitely trying to do that. If you want, Jeffrey, introduce yourself. We can keep it going.
Yeah, what's up, everyone? My name is Jeffrey. This is actually my first TCG I've been playing, but I've been playing for about a little over a year at this point. I started during Rise of Floodborn, and so far I've been to one DLC in Fort Worth. I didn't do so hot. I think I was like what in like the 600s range at the end of the tourney. Um, I brought Emerald Steel, discard, trying to be a little toxic there. But other than that, I did. I've done decently in set champs. I've topped a couple set champs. I won a couple set champs, and then I've like absolutely choked out of last rounds of set champs. But overall, I
Done
just
it
want
all.
to. Oh man, yeah, but overall I just want to get better at playing and then become real competitive in terms of like going to all these big events and becoming a better player and a more prominent player for Lorcana and just see where it goes.
Yeah, that's awesome. I didn't bring up, but the only other game I've mostly played was Yu-Gi-Oh! I have a regional top in that. And other than that, it's the only game I've played competitively. I play like Magic Commander at the card shop, but that's about it. So other than that, we go gung ho into Lorcana. It's both what we do every day. Like just love this game. We try to play as much as we can. And to be honest, that's why we started this podcast is we wanted to give people an outlet for I don't want to say newer players, but people who are like trying to get their foot in the door, but also just want to have as much input as they can and like content as they can for the competitive side. Since I feel like there's a lot of stuff that's either paywalled or like just not talked about in the Lorcana scene. So I feel like we can help bring a light to that, even if it's just covering deck lists or talking about what cards we think are good, even if it's you don't even play them at 4, but you play them at, like, 2 or 1 as a tech choice, like, it all depends on your local meta, and we just wanna talk about that and bring some light to it and see what we can do, you know? So
Oh yeah, and definitely because usually with some of these Lorcana podcasts, usually hearing from like very top of the line players, but like for me, for instance, like I just started playing a little over a year ago, so I kind of bring a newer player's perspective, not a brand new player, but someone who's definitely learning the ropes of everything. So you'll definitely hear that side of it in comparison to someone who's been playing card games for like a decade
yeah,
plus.
and that goes both ways of, like, just because we're new doesn't mean our opinions are invalid, and just because they've been playing for 10 years doesn't mean their opinions are always the tenfold the correct answer every time, you know what I mean? Because as they say, like, you can learn anything from anyone who's there could be a brand new player, they've been playing for a week. I could still learn something from them about the game, you know? So it's really cool, especially in something as objective as like a card game. So
Exactly.
so that's our little introduction. The next thing we want to talk about is just a few key cards we think are cool or stand out from this new set. we were kinda Jesus, we're gonna kinda bypass the the big, territory of the crab and, the new one drop bell, you know? Just because
Yeah,
everyone's covering it, everyone knows how good they are. Same with Scrooge. I feel like, the Zane list really showed how good Scrooge actually is. People at first were kinda scared or confused if he was actually good. I know I picked up my last copy that I needed for him at, like, 14 bucks, 13 bucks on release day, and now he's what, like 30, 40 bucks, so
I think he's like 45. I picked
yeah.
up my last two copies at like $30 each. I picked them up Sunday afternoon at 30 bucks each, and then Monday morning he was up to like 45. So,
It's crazy. It's crazy how fast the metagame moves, especially in Lorcana. Like if a deck it literally tops and there's a key card in there that's very cheap and people don't have it yet, like by the end of the day, it's gonna be double, triple in price. Same with foils. And always buy your foils. If you want a card and it's cheap, get the foils first. Always
oh
recommend it.
yeah, especially I always have regrets because I always I always have a plan to get a specific card, whether it's an enchanted or a foil, and I'm about to buy it in a couple of days, but then it doubles in price, and I'm just
Yep.
like I just cringe at myself.
Yep. I've learned, if I especially if it comes to foils and if it's a, like, rare through legendary, just buy it. Like,
Oh
don't
yeah,
think about it. Especially on release weekend. Like, if you think the card will ever be good, if you think it'll ever see play, even if it's just for you, like, get the foils while they're cheap, get them on the release weekend. Um, because I saw someone talking about it on Twitter about, Scrooge and Tamatoa, for example, are only getting better. Like, they're the worst they can be right now, and I never
oh
really
yeah,
thought about it that way till, but it makes complete sense because like, Scrooge looks at top 4 and grabs an item. He's now like, as sets get better and we find better 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drop items, he's now searching for all those items, you know what I mean? And once I thought about it
exactly.
that way, I was like, he really is at his worst state right now, so it's pretty cool to think about.
Yeah, I'm just at the point where it's like he's already up so high that I don't feel like getting him.
Yeah, because you have what, 2 you said? 2 or 3?
No, no, I have a playset. It's
Oh,
just
okay,
like,
so
it's just, do I really feel like dropping $60 on a foil or something like that? I
oh, I
mean,
feel like we missed it.
yeah, we
The
definitely,
foil is gone, sadly.
yeah, and plus, like, especially with set two in Japanese coming out soon, I want to be able to save some dollars for that. Like,
Yep,
I'd rather, instead of trying to spend $35 on a foil Hiram in English, I'd rather try to get at a lower price in Japanese instead.
yep.
So, stuff like that, I'm trying to be cautious of.
And they are playable here in NA. We can use the Japanese and Chinese cards. Actually, we can use any language, I believe.
Yeah.
I know the other countries aren't as fortunate to use our stuff over there, but we are lucky enough to use any, as of right now, any foreign language. So,
Yeah. Which is good.
um, I do think once they start playing them more at a competitive level at like DLCs and bigger events, like they might have to talk about like double sleeves or stuff like that because we tested it ourselves and we could tell the difference when we were drawing them, unless we put inner sleeves. But if we didn't have inner sleeves or if we just had outer sleeves, we were able to tell the difference.
Oh,
So
yeah. Like, and I think, well, I've been hearing about how there's some big tourneys in other states where they're not, some stores are allowing them, but other stores aren't allowing them. So I
kind
think
of like a
it's,
house rules.
yeah, which if that's the case, I would be more cautious and just bring the English copies as backups with you instead of, because you don't want to run in a situation where you only have your 60 card deck and they'd be like, oh no, your deck's not eligible to play, and then you're kind of screwed out. So I would just bring the English variants of them so you can just swap them out in case they say something.
Yep. I feel like they should announce that beforehand, if that was the case. 'Cause
Oh
I'd be
yeah,
kind of upset if I pulled up to an event with my deck and it's legal, the cards are legal thanks to Ravensburg,
true.
but I pull up and the house says, like, "Nah, you're not allowed to play these." I'd be a little upset. I would try to find a way to figure out what I could do to play, but, I would hope they would say that beforehand.
Yeah.
I'm also a nerd and try to look at as much information as I can about the bigger events before I go to them. I
Oh yeah,
know.
same here. Because like I would hate for someone to, because it's one thing if it's like a local event, you're driving like 10, 15 minutes, but if you're
Yeah,
traveling out of state and then they try to hit you with that, which you would suppose they would tell you beforehand, but there's always some store owners that like want to hit you with something last minute
yep,
on the day of and just screw you over. So you never
yep.
know.
No, I agree. So, let's jump into some of the cards we were talking about besides just Scrooge. I wanted to highlight the giant cobra. He is one of when the card got revealed, I was very salty. um, I am a Ruby Sapphire player at heart. It is my favorite deck. I've been playing it since Hiram was printed. That card is insane. So, if you've played the deck, you understand that purple decks usually just body us just due to go alone. So, as they give purple more ammunition to gain passive lore after they hit 10, 12 lore, it's really painful in my eyes to see cards like this printed. But it's really cool because we got a new mechanic with the vanish keyword, which reads when an opponent chooses this character for an action, you banish it. And that just means any action, songs, anything like that. It doesn't mean when you like use an item like Sapphire Coil or something to target that doesn't make it vanish, but any action actually makes it vanish.
Yeah, which I think some people were confused or they didn't process the information like enough yet because I did a draft and then some people were trying to do the Sapphire coil or the other versions coils on it and to get the Vanish characters vanish and I was like, nah, you can't do that.
Yep.
And then they were like they had to redo their whole turnover. So yeah, actions only.
Yeah, the vanish keyword I feel like is pretty balanced because it's a very well statted card. It's a 3 drop, it's inkable, which is massive. Because the uninkable count can hurt, and especially in purple steel, but in purple alone with Genie and Rabbits running around. And then it's overstated just like the entire bounce package, right? It's a 4/4 on 3, like it fits in perfectly.
Yeah.
And the effect is when you play this character, you may choose and discard a card to gain 2 lore, and it quests for 1. I feel like this card alone, especially in a dock build, can really swing games in their favor. Because you could play this, discard a dock, play another dock. Like it's just there's so many awesome combos you can do. The card's nuts.
Yeah, and I want because that not only that, but I think it lowers the or an Amethyst Steel deck needs to get before they can just start dropping cards like this and Goat to
Yeah,
start gaining their lore. Because beforehand, we talked about Goat range being like 15, 16, but now they got to worry about the quote unquote Cobra range, where if you're at 12 and then you drop a Cobra, you get to 14 when you discard, then you're basically inside Goat range territory already. So it basically lowers that range tremendously.
yeah, it definitely makes you have to think more on how much do you allow. It depends the game format too, but how much do you allow your opponent to quest and get away with early bodies? Um, and that's if you're playing like a mid-range deck that can handle taking stuff out early. Because if you're playing an aggro list and this deck like board clears you, you're kind of just screwed out of luck. Like your game's over most likely.
Oh yeah, and if they manage to bait you and have you waste your songs or actions on other characters, then they drop this out because then you have nothing to answer this.
Because I've been playing against people in person and they've been using this card way too early in games, in my opinion. They'll play it on curve on turn 3. And I feel like that's not necessarily, unless it's the only play you have, like it's not the right play, in my opinion.
Yeah, I
Or
don't
if you
think
have a
so
play
either.
line to discard something to play a dock the turn after. But like the song
Like,
can sing strength, they can sing your friends on the other side. Like this card has a lot of advantages that can help you early game, but when you're discarding like valuable resources, I feel like it's not worth it. So,
yeah, this is definitely a late game card just because the effect alone of gaining the lore. Yeah, like you said, like I wouldn't want to play this card earlier unless it's like the only card that I can play, or if I don't really want to bounce something with a fox. yet. Like if I want to build up the board presence and like keep getting more board presence to overwhelm my opponent, then I would consider dropping this. But yeah, this is basically because I've tried this deck like one or twice. I haven't really played with it that much. But when I first started testing it, I found myself inking it early on if I had a better play line, and then when I got another Cobra later in the game, then I would save it just so I can use that effect.
Yeah, going on inking it early, it also gives you another option of I always talked about because I played Purple Steel a lot last set. Of I always talked about how Goat was the uninkable. He
Yeah.
feels uninkable to me, especially in Purple Steel, because he was a good way to close games out against like Ruby Sapphire or in the mirror matches. Um, so there was times where I was cutting Goat down to 3 because I wanted to see it less because I didn't want to ink it. Um,
Mhm.
but now with this card in rotation, it helps you have more options on your inking process, especially if you are running friends on the other side, or if you're running like a whole new world Jafar deck, which I have no clue how good that is right now. Um, or if you're
Yeah.
running like a dock build. So it's kind of, or if you're just running like friends on the other side and like a library, depending what your card draw is. It makes
Okay.
it really nice because now the deck has options and different like draw strategies because purple's so good at drawing cards to begin with. So
Yeah.
it really helps you like you can prioritize like is white rose better? Is this card better? Is the new 2 drop? I forgot his name. The 2 drop that enters if something is
Oh,
exerted, gain a lore.
the honey
Honey
mirror.
Marin. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that card's also amazing. There's so many different passive lore strategies that can like help this deck be elevated now to where like you don't feel as bad inking a goat or inking this card because you have so many cards that'll get you over the hump now. So it's pretty cool.
Oh yeah. Yeah, like you said, all them cards that gain you lore is like you Amethyst and Amethyst Steel in particular is getting to that point where it's like, oh yeah, if I need to ink a goat, I'm not afraid of inking the goat because of this giant cobra, or vice versa. I can ink the giant cobra so that way I can play the goat, depending on how the board state is, depending on, if they're like, like you said, if I want to discard a dock because I have two docks in hand, I can get the two lore, dump the giant cobra, play the dock, get two more cards, or you can play the goat, get a lore, attack something or quest, so you can get your second lore a little bit later, but have some more board presence. Or if you have more bounce cards, you can keep bouncing the goat back and forth.
Yep. And if anything, when good cards like this are printed, I feel like it makes Snake and Fox feel more like they're uninkable
Yeah,
compared to Goat.
yeah.
Just due to the fact of like, I've play tested the deck just a little bit this set, and I felt like anytime I inked a Snake, I was regretting it just due to like my late game threats. I want to keep bouncing back and forth. And then all these new passive lures, like I want to be able to repetitively play this to give myself advantages. So like inking a snake now feels way worse than inking the goat, in my opinion.
Oh, oh yeah, and I like thinking about the card more and looking at it and how you mentioned the Jafar deck. I think it could be best utilized in the Jafar wheel deck, especially if someone runs snakes in that build. Because I think some people don't run snakes, but some people do in that build.
Yep.
Because like if you sing a whole new world and then you get a snake and then you can just bounce the Cobra back and then discard a card, and then you end up whole new worlding it again, you're gaining massive amounts of lore in just a couple turns.
And speaking of the Jafar deck, I'm looking it up right now. They got a new 3 drop shift target as well that has a similar crab effect. So when you play this character, chosen character gains Challenger +2 this turn. He's a 3/2 that quests for 2 and is inkable. So it's another shift target that they have. So there might be something there. I don't think it's like tier 1 gonna win major events constantly, but I feel like with the weird meta we have currently, like a whole new world Jafar that could randomly just top an event. You know what I mean? So
I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like I was playing online like about I was playing online about an hour ago, and I kind of got milled out by by Amethyst Steel.
yep,
They weren't running the Jafar package specifically, but they were running the whole new worlds, and
yep.
then they were running the Amethyst Chromacons, and they were running the new Amethyst action, the Show Me More, where each player draws three
Draw three.
cards.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm not gonna lie, I was one turn away from winning, and then they just hit me with another whole new world and Chromacon and show me more, and it was like, oh, your opponent has won the match. I was like,
Yeah.
bro.
Yeah. Nah, it makes
Yeah.
sense because the amount of cards you draw. Jeffrey's been playing a lot of the Zan blue steel item spam with the workshop where you just draw two with a popsicle.
Oh yeah.
So it makes sense why the mill is very strong and can be strong because if you pay attention to how much your opponent is drawing and you save your whole new worlds and use them properly, like you can just mill them out before they get the win with the Tomatoas for 12 lore in a turn. So
Yeah, especially if the blue seal player isn't seeing the big Tamatoas like in time to hurry up and quest for game before that mill happens.
man, they should have gave this dude Singer 4, the giant cobra. That way he could sing Zeus too. He'd be the best card in the game.
Bro,
But
that'd be nuts. Like, I mean, if they made it four, I don't know how many people would play it that much. Only because that four slot is just so overcrowded.
yeah.
Like, I feel like Ravensburger is doing that on purpose with Amethyst and Steel. It's just like we're
Oh,
just gonna
definitely.
overcrowd this four
Definitely.
slot because I mean now because they got the Ghost Rabbit, the Genie, and then they put in the Zeus card. And then they have all the other characters that no one plays, like the other Dolores at four, where if
Yeah.
you play one of the characters exerted, draw a card, and a couple other cards as well. So it's just, I think
No, there's
Madame Elephant is
yeah,
four as
4 drop
well.
as well. Yep.
So
No,
yeah,
there's they know that's the purple sweet number is definitely the 4 and 3 drop. And I feel like steel is very much at the 2 and like 5 and 6 drop. So they know when it comes to card balancing and the sense of how much a card costs, I feel like they're pretty good at finding the number just to make like deck building not easy to make it hard and you need to calculate like what you want to play, what you as a player should prioritize, stuff like that.
it kind of makes sense too because when you think about Ruby, the slot they overcrowd is a six drop slot with the Tremaines, the Medusas,
Yep.
and the Maui Sharks and stuff like that. So every card, and then the Amber with the three drop slot with the Aerials, and then the Troubadour. No, not the Troubadours, but the other new Amber legendaries they brought out, like the
Oh,
Aurora
Aurora. Yep.
and the Gaston from a couple sets ago. So yeah, they definitely try to overcrowd some slots in each color.
Yep. And then it comes down to what you think in your deck building process like is actually a valuable card. Um and that kind of can segue us into our next card is Penny. She is a Amber Steel 2 drop inkable. 1/2 and quest for 2. And her effect is when you play this character, you may remove 2 damage from chosen character and they gain resist 1 until the start of your next turn.
Okay, like you gotta tell me what's up with this card because like I'm not gonna lie, like I talked with some friends of mine before this set dropped, and we weren't fans of this card at all. At least in constructed, we think in
Gotcha.
draft it's pretty good, but why do you think why is this card notable to you?
I feel like depending the list you run for Steel Song, it can be super strong. I've seen 3 different lists so far for Steel Song. Some people are going back to actually someone got top 16 in the 10 case with a more traditional Robin Hood shift line list. I don't think they were running Penny. They might have, but I don't think so. But it was back to the basic whole new world. You play Robin Hoods. Hope you have turn one Cindy because it's still an amazing opener. It's
Yeah.
still a top 2 opener in the game. And so it was very traditional. But I know in like the Diggy Hole or the Dock discard, like discard your hand, play Dock. The Dock builds, this card is very strong because like you're not getting to draw a card off, but if you can slam a Smee into something and not trade and gain the resist, and you get to heal your Smee, so he's actually not gonna take any damage at the end of your turn. As well as the aggression part of if you're playing the more low to the ground aggro builds, which most people are going to. this card questing for 2 adds so much more to your curve to keep stuff alive late game, while also keeping the spread of I'm gonna quest for 2 consistently. Because
That
sometimes,
make
like, the Calhouns at 2 at the 2 spot can hurt late game. Because like, if your opponent has nothing on board and it's just questing for 1, it can't push you over sometimes.
that makes sense from the aspect. I mean, I never thought of this me angle, and to be honest, I think a lot of cards. Well, I think a lot of cards justify the reasoning based on SME alone,
Yep,
but for low to the ground Amber Steel decks, I think that makes sense. Um, and I think the other thing is like when when people think about playing cards with low strength like this on curve, they immediately think of like, oh, this card's gonna get brawled, or this card's gonna get removed as soon as I play it. But I mean, but if you play it late game and you stop your SME from dying, I mean, and Penny ends up dying, you still got some type of effect out of it. You still kept a character on board, so it wasn't a total waste if they managed to banish it
yep.
on the start of their turn. Yeah, like I can see the reasoning behind this card.
Because you can now with Penny, you can now slam your Smee into a bell, and your Smee will live. And that alone can be a massive turn in your favor if you're the Steel Song player, just by knocking out the 3 drop for a blue steel deck.
Yeah, and with the resist, he still won't take the damage at the end of
Yep.
the turn either.
So
Yeah.
that's a little tech that is very cool that I don't think a lot of people have picked up on yet from that card. Resist is a keyword that is just nuts.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
it's very slept on. I mean, some people were running. I think it's One Last Hope. I think that's what it's called. Some
Yeah.
people were running in that at the end of the last set. I was running into it a lot locally, and so the card's pretty crazy. Um, I have it was a top 32 list, so I don't know what they actually placed. I'm pretty sure it was like top 16 though, from what I saw on Twitter from the 10 case is the Robin Hood list. They were running 4 Me, 3 Penny, 3 Troubadour, and the other tech card they had besides the Benjo was the Miss Bianca, which is also really cool. I don't want to touch on her this video, but I would like to touch on her in probably the next podcast, talking about why that card is so cool. But
Oh
so
yeah.
there is some spice going around with the Steel Song decks.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited for Steel Song only because there's so many variations you can do with it, and not even like in the completely different variations of the traditional singing song, Steel Song, then the Diggy Hole deck,
Yep,
and then like the non-Diggy Hole, but still more aggro based list. Like, because even in the classic sing version, they're starting to become different variations, and they're
yep.
starting to become split off in that aspect as well.
And that's awesome to me because it makes deck building very fun. Because I feel like almost all the deck colors that are very strong, like the deck cores, the 2 color cores, they're starting to get to points where they all have different ways you can take the decks. Steel Blue has like 3 different builds. Red Blue has 3 different builds. Steel Song has like 5 different builds you can do.
Yeah.
4. You have like Lore Gains, who he has the Steel Fossilif, so he's not running that many songs, but he's going off the Mufasa flips, which I think is really cool. And I hope to see what he upgrades in that deck because I've never had the guts to play that deck in person. I'm not a huge believer in Mufasa. I think the card is awesome, but he doesn't have enough support for what he does.
I've
So I think the card
actually
is sick.
someone actually used a Steel Fossa list against me in the set champs, and that was back last set during what Azurite C, and then I was using green purple, and I would always get to around 16, 17 lore and lose the game because they were able to start overwhelming my board or the board in general, and
Hmm.
then their version had the big bodyguard, the chin pose, which
Yep.
was able to just stop me in my tracks completely, and it would allow them to just quest out in one turn.
Yep.
And the Mufasa just like really helps out that deck because you want to get rid of the Mufasa, but then once you do, another character comes out, and it's most likely a bigger character. It's rare that in those Steel Fossa decks that that they're dropping a 1 or 2 cost character.
Hmm.
And besides it's me, that's still dangerous to come out of Mufasa, especially if the board is already filled up. But yeah, the Steel Fossa decks are dangerous in their own right.
Yeah. I'm excited to see what people do with that deck. I have no experience on it, but I think the deck is awesome. Mufasa deserves some more love. I think there's something to be built from that card alone. So hopefully one day some
Oh yeah,
Amber Ruby players can get some more love for that too.
I mean, as soon as I guess more decks become diversified, and then more good cards come in the card pool of different variations. Because like I know it's a pipe dream, but like as like a Mufasa and like a Amber Sapphire list, if because that right now is basically not possible. But like in years, let's just say in like years years moving forward, like if they print out some nuts Amber and Sapphire cards, that could become
Yep.
a thing where you'll one day you'll run into an Amber Sapphire list that runs a Mufasa and you'll be like, what the hell is this? Like
Yep. Mufasa into the 8-drop Mufasa, untap everything. Like there's some stuff there.
yeah, it's nuts.
Um, so also you talked about big bodyguards. Notable card is Lady Cluck. Not gonna talk about her today, but a 2/7 with Ward, like the card is needs to be talked about.
Oh yeah,
Um,
definitely.
I think we'll touch on that in the next podcast. So to keep up with all our steel cards, let's move on to Gantu,
All
the
right.
big 4-drop.
Dude,
Um,
I want to talk about this one. All
go
right.
for it.
Yeah, so I played in a league earlier this week with I was using the Zan's Blue Steel list, and then someone was actually playing a Ruby Steel list with this Gantu in it. And bro, like the amount of slowdown this causes item deck is ridiculous. And when you brick with the blue steel list and then they throw up this Gantu, it's a nightmare because not only does he have the effect of when you play this character, characters can't exert to sing songs until the start of your next turn. He also has a passive effect when he's on board where each player pays 2 more ink to play actions or items.
Yep.
And so what's nuts about this is that like a 1 cost popsicle turns into 3 costs. A 3 cost fishbone turns into 5 costs. And so you're essentially the blue steel item list is going from playing multiple items per turn to essentially playing maybe only 1 item,
One
maybe
or
2
two,
items
and it's your turn.
max.
It's literally the turn. Like,
Yeah, like you're losing so much tempo off this
yep.
because of this 1 card. And then not only that, like if they throw multiple on it, the effect stacks. So there was one game where this dude put down 2 Gantus and I was paying 5 ink for a single popsicle. And
Yeah,
it
that's
was the
insane.
worst feeling in the
Yep.
world. The
There's
most
also
expensive pop.
oh, go
Yeah.
ahead, go ahead.
No. Oh, you can go ahead. You can go ahead.
Um, what also people I think are sleeping on with this card is obviously it's uninkable, so making room for it is really tough when Pete exists and has kind of a similar effect. They're very similar. In my but one thing people were missing is you can play this against Ruby Sapphire. You can play
Hmm.
this when they're gonna go on to turn where they're gonna hit 7 ink, and now they can no longer play the B prep just due to the fact of it's now going to cost 7. So you can play this on curve, hit this. B prep now costs 7. If they don't have a big Sisu out to sing it on the next turn, you can now slam down like yeah. This is before even thinking of a P on curve after this. You're just delaying like the board wipe pretty much. I don't know how to describe it, but like on curve you can delay board wipes just
Yeah.
with the stacks. So
And then like it delays a potential brawl target as well.
yes,
Like literally when you play this Gantu, or if you have 2 of them out on the field, like the only thing a Ruby Sapphire can really do is play a big Sisu and hope to wipe your board
yep,
because then they're wasting way too much ink to play a single action or to play a single item. And actually, what it's gone to, I think it's going to be the sleeper card of this set. I actually want to buy a playset of foils of this card, even
I
though
think
you
they're like
don't
12 bucks right
play.
now.
Oh,
So
I don't know about that.
yeah, I think they're at like 12. The dollar it's or the card itself was like $1.50 yesterday. And as
Yeah,
of now, the 12th, when I checked earlier, they were like 3.50. So
that's nuts.
other
Well,
people might be talking about it. I definitely recommend getting at least a play set. You're probably not going to play four, but I definitely recommend getting some.
yeah. Thankfully, I pulled a playset already, but like, I guess my dream of getting a foil playset is kind of done right now. Like,
Yeah,
because I'm not paying 12,
not
13 bucks.
$12. Nah,
Nah.
I'm in the same boat.
Yeah,
But the card is insane. I wish he quested for two. They
agreed.
make so many cards that are overstated. You might as well have made him overstated, in my opinion. Made him quest for two,
Yeah,
or give
especially
him
since
three
they're
attack.
unequal.
I think three attack would have done much better because it would have gave Ruby Sapphire a coil target still. Whereas now, like they don't have to coil; they can just literally play Sisu on curve and he dies.
Hmm.
So it's kind of unfortunate and makes him a little worse, in my opinion. If he had three attack and they had to coil or ice block and they had to have these options and they had to get to it, it would make it a lot better, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And like, even if it quested for two lore, because I can understand the reasoning why it might just want to be one lore, because at the end of the day, a lot of people are probably not going to want to turn this card sideways
Yeah.
unless absolutely needed. So they're probably thinking, oh, what's the point of slapping two lore on him? Which the other side could be, well, if we slap him with two lore, more people might want to quest with him
Yep.
to so he's not one of those freestanding
Yeah.
ward non-ward
It
characters.
adds interaction. Exactly. Like he pretty much it reads as if he has ward just due to the fact that he's gonna stand there.
Oh yeah.
But like I don't know. I feel like if you added a second quest, a second lore to him, it would force players to have player error. You know what I mean? Of like they could turn him sideways and he dies to anything really. So
Mm, yeah, because
um,
during my games against a Ruby Steel player who played this, he almost never turned this sideways, except for like, and when he finally did, I just like I sacrificed characters to get rid of him just so I can start playing normally again. And so yeah, if he had an extra lore, it would definitely cause user error and players that might not be, I wouldn't say as experienced as like the 20 or 10-year players who
yeah.
know never to turn this card sideways.
It's kind of like Flynn, Oswald, Chicha, like these cards that pretty much just say like I'm not turning sideways. But Oswald, for example, quest for two. It just makes these cards like have a bigger skill gap, and like you could also do the math on if it quest for two. Like you could do the math of if I am playing steel purple and I have a giant cobra in my hand, like what's the math of me questing with this once or twice to get me over the hump to play that card? So
Yeah, yep.
it's a missed thing there. I think that's the only complaint I have for the card. I think being uninkable is perfectly balanced. I understand why. Uh, it's one of the first few stacks, is what they call it in Magic. Stacks is where you force your opponent to like pay more, have to do more things to use their cards. Um, so I think it balances that out very well. My biggest complaint is I wish I had three attack. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, I wish it would at least be able to trade with the Fox.
Yep.
Which, like, I know everyone talks about, oh, I wish this card can trade with a Fox, but like, if a Fox can take something, a card like this with much effects and still survive, that's just it's insane. Because not only is a Fox getting rid of like a huge stagger to the board, they survive to take out another character or force me to sacrifice a character to take out that Fox at the same time.
No, I agree 1000%. Let's go quickly over Bagheera. We went on a tangent over the last two cards, so we'll
Yeah.
just go kind of quickly over Bagheera here. He is a 5-drop inkable bodyguard with the stat line of 4-3, 4 attack, 3 defense. Quest for two. Good job. Proud of you guys for
Yeah.
those work. Um, and his effect reads during an opponent's turn when this character is banished, deal 2 damage to each opposing character. So a 5-drop bodyguard that says when I die, deal 2 damage to everything my opponent controls. Trades with a Maui, trades with a shark.
Mhm.
It trades with all the heavy hitters, which is very balanced in my opinion. I think the
Yeah.
card is awesome. It's also another sleeper card of the set. It costing 5 instead of 4 hurts, but it also keeps Pluto viable in some decks. So I understand the building concept of the stat line on this card.
Yeah, and honestly, like at first, I had neglected this card a little bit. Not all the way, but I found out when I played against this card, in a lot of situations, I was kind of dumb. I wouldn't say dumbfounded, but I was put in awkward positions where it felt like I had to get rid of the Bagheera,
Yep.
even though I didn't want to, because then the rest of my board would be severely damaged or a lot of my board would be wiped out.
Yep.
And that's when I quickly came to the realization was like, oh, this card is better than what people give it credit for, at least for like this opening and reviewing of the set when it comes out. Yeah, and I agree with you. I think this is gonna be a sleeper card, and I feel like someone's gonna come up with a nuts aggro deck or a aggro to bodyguard deck that quickly finishes off games.
Yep. I don't want to touch on it too much, but since I feel like for sets now, we've had the outlook of it dies to Medusa, and then it turned into it dies to Sisu. Pretty much, but with how Sapphire Coil and these blue decks are gonna run around now, I feel like you should just play cards you want to play because everything is gonna die to those cards now, just due to the fact of how crazy blue and red are now. So if you
Mhm.
think a card is good and you think it has legs, like we think Gantu and Bagheera have legs, you should play those cards because at the end of the day, almost all your cards can die to Brawl, Dragonfire, Medusa, Tremaine, Sisu. They all can die to that stuff at this point. So you might as well just play cards that will reward you for benefiting from that. So like Bagheera can help protect your board because it'll now trade with a Maui Shark. And I think that's insane and it's awesome. So definitely play things you think are good. Even if it's only at 1 or 2, is worth a shot, worth to see if it's good.
Yep, I agree.
Uh, the next card I want to talk about is Pete, and this was actually in one of the 10K's tourney top lists. Uh, I've been playing a ton of discard online. I think the deck is very strong currently in the early set meta, as discard and all the steel decks running around, or not discard aggro and all the steel decks running around. So this deck is very strong. P adds a lot to the deck because you can play it on curve. P is a 6-drop inkable. He is a 5/5, 5 attack, 5 defense. He is a shift 4, and he shifts on one of the best cards in the game. And he reads while this character is exerted, opposing characters can't exert to sing songs, and your pirate characters gain resist 1. And he quests for 2. He
Okay, so like, all right, so when you told me about this card in this specific deck, I told people about the inclusion of this card. So why do you think this card specifically? Okay, because you explained the stats and stuff. Why specifically? I guess the discard deck. Why is this card shine in your opinion?
So when I've been playtesting online, I've found myself a lot of the time wanting to keep my SME alive. I'm not playing Calhouns or anything like that, so a lot of the time my SME is gonna have to do a lot of the heavy lifting for me, or the Diablo singing songs, and I just need bodies to stick on board. But one of the cooler parts of this card is you get to play it on curve, and he reads pirate characters gain resist 1. So I keep always all these steel talks we've had, it's always come back to Smee because he's one of the best cards in the game. And so is Pete and playing him on curve. So this playline can shut down a steel song deck just due to you can play Smee, you can play Pete, you can then shift Pete. Your Smee now has resist 1. And I don't think people realize that Pete himself will also have resist 1 because when you're challenging, he is exerting. So he is now a 5/6 pretty much.
Okay.
So that little stat line alone adds a lot. And if you, because how you choose how you want to do combat and stuff like that in this game, you can challenge with Pete first, give himself resist, trade into whatever you want. And then you can use your SME or whatever else you have on board to swing in your Diablo. Um, I've been doing play lines where I'll sing a song to take out genies, for example. I'll sing a song. um, there's just there's so many ways to like stack the resist combo with the P and the Smee as
Huh.
the two pirates you have in the deck. Especially to use him to sing to take stuff out with the Diablo into genies. Because I found the discard deck into purple is a super easy matchup, but sometimes I struggle trading into the Elsa and the genies with my Diablos because I don't run the coves. So using him to sing, um, and then that makes it to where like my bird will trade if they attack into it is very strong as well. Sorry, I was kind of jumping all over the place there, but
No,
there's
I,
there's so much like he adds having a big shift line in the deck minus like if you ran the Robin Hood still or if you only rely on like the Prince John and all your little 3 drops, 2 and 3 drops. So
I mean, I think that's on bases. I think that's what makes the card good. Like if you find yourself jumping around like that, it means like there's like multiple points of betterment of like, oh, this card can do this to this card, or this card can influence decisions in a positive way of like bettering certain play lines. That's where I think a card can really shine.
because I just looked at the top 8 list from the 10 case, and they don't play any Zeus, but they have the Brunos. I'm running 2 Zeus, 2 Brunos on my list, and the fact you can play Pete, shift Pete, and then sing a Bruno or a Zeus, depending what the best case scenario is. It makes it very viable because he's just a big singer for your deck. And in their list, for example, they don't have a ton of massive singers besides Beast. They have Beast, Lucifer, and Pete. Those are the only
Yeah.
5 drop singers that can sing like Bruno. So that makes sense why they don't have Zeus in there. But so it just gives you so many options. So the card is awesome.
Yeah, and looking at this deck list right now, I kind of like the inclusion of it because the big issue that these discard decks had was trying to force a high cost big body in the deck. Like the old ones had Tinkerbells because of the more shift target, but this one feels like a natural inclusion in the deck. Not only because he can shift onto Morph, but like you said, he can shift onto Pete, one
Yep.
of the best cards in the game, which is basically a auto for include in any steel deck.
Yep.
So to have this Pete included in this deck, and he's a big body, can take out basically almost any character essentially, and have that resist and give resist to Smee as well. Yeah, I think this is. I like the inclusion now that I'm seeing
I also don't know what other pirates there are. I'm not gonna lie to you, but
it.
there might be some depth there with the pirates gain resist one. Maybe running because I don't know how good like Benja is. I have him at 1 in my discard deck, and he's came up a few times, but most of the time I end up inking him. Um, so I don't know if
Yeah,
there's better like pirate bodies you can run that can help trade into stuff or apply pressure by questing for 2. But the resist one keyword is pretty nuts, so it can add a lot.
yeah, yeah,
So we have Baymax, the multicolor. I just want to touch on them real quick. Universal Shift is an awesome mechanic they've added to the game. They also need to be very touchy with how they use that because it can get out of hand very quickly. So I'm happy they put it in the color combo it's in. But he's a 6 drop uninkable. He's a 5/5 that quests for 2. His effect isn't the best. It says when you play this character, if you use shift to play him, remove all damage from him. I found myself shifting him on like bells or other cards like later. But to be honest, his effect isn't that good. So, but the
yeah.
universal shift alone is just a cool thing. So.
And I think part of the reason why the effect is only like that because they can't give him this crazy, insane effect, and then he can end up shifting on anyone. um, which makes sense. And then because he's already a big stat line for someone that can shift on anyone, and then plus he's questing for two, like it's nuts. Um, I like this card specifically because I know you mentioned it in the green blue deck and how you using it in basically constructed games. I think this card is nuts in limited formats.
Yep.
I've tried this card in draft and sealed, and playing this on curve because a lot of times with limited formats, especially in Lorcana, with what I've tried now, is that it's, there's a lot of times where you get in standoff moments, or it ends up being one side completely overpowers the other side,
Yep.
like pretty quickly. And playing this on curve, and then you end up playing a bodyguard in limited right after this, and the bodyguards in this set is like Lady Cluck, and then you have the super dog, the yellow blue. I forgot what his actual
Oh,
name was.
uh, Thunderbolt? Is it
Thunderbolt. Yeah,
Thunderbolt? Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Thunderbolt. I shifted a Baymax. What I would usually do, I would so turn one would be card soldiers. Turn two would be the new Queen of Hearts. Turn three, I would play something like a Orville, and then turn four, I would shift the Baymax either onto the card soldiers or the Queen of Hearts, and then I would just start going crazy that turn, whether attacking or questing. And then the next turn, I would play the Thunderbolt Bodyguard, which gives you an insane board state.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, this card in sealed and draft is actually nuts. The 5/5 alone adds so much, but the fact you can shift it on some terrible vanilla that killed something for you and heal it is awesome. And then playing it on a curve to where you can protect it is also just insane. So wanted to talk about was the Prince. He is a amber card, a 2 cost uninkable. He is a 0/5 bodyguard. That is it. He quests for one. So I want to hear
Okay.
your input on this.
All right. So I'm not gonna lie. Like in the friend group where we basically reviewed every card of the set, we basically all trashed this card.
Hmm.
But okay, not only is it decent and limited, but if you look at it, it's a 5 willpower, so that's already a big body. And I went up against the Emerald Amber aggro deck that was running this card. And as the blue steel player running Zan's list or a list similar, this card made me struggle so much because if you think about it, in the Emerald Amber aggro list, they're running like a Daisy turn one. They might drop a Ursula turn two to get rid of a Strength or a Zeus or a Storm Rage on, and
Especially if they're on
then
the play.
yep, and then turn three they might drop like what's a Amber Emerald? They might drop like a two more one drops or a two drop and a one drop. Turn turn four, they might drop like a Rapunzel to heal some of the Daisy, and then turn five, they drop like a two drop, a one drop, and then they drop a Prince going sideways. And so they have this overwhelming board. And then if you're a blue steel deck, you're starting off kind of slow because that deck kind of runs slow, and then trying to get rid of the Prince itself when you don't have anything like a Brawl is rough because you either have to waste a Zeus on it or you have to hope your board's wide enough to clear it with the Strength. And at that point, if you only have like two or three characters, by the time you get rid of a Prince, they basically are like high, super high in lore, and like 13 to 15 lore at that point. So
Yep.
this card can really stall you out. I don't know how it works against in other matches that's like non-Ruby. I imagine Ruby has an easy time taking this card out, but I
Oh yeah.
imagine non-Ruby decks like will find themselves having a harder time dealing with this card than just looking at it from the surface.
Yeah. Nah, if you're not playing Ruby, like you can't just Calhoun to this into this and gain 2 lore. You know what I mean? You
Yeah.
like some people are gonna have to waste a Zeus. This is a Zeus target at
Yeah.
2 drop. Like that must feel terrible. So I haven't
It's
played
not.
against the card yet. I haven't seen it at all. I know when I do see it, I'm gonna be pissed. So, because I've been playing a lot of steel so far, but knowing I'm gonna have to use a Smee and a Calhoun to take this out is gonna be intimidating and confusing. I feel like this card can add a lot of human error to the game just due to the fact of its stat line. So
Oh yeah.
it's pretty cool. There's also the new Tuk Tuk, who's not a 0/5, but another 2 drop bodyguard that can also just add some weird interactions for
Yeah,
players.
was 0-1 with like 2 resists.
Yeah,
Like,
something like that. So it's
yeah.
just another
Wait.
weird bodyguard drop for the 2 drop slot. So
Yeah, and even though the stat lines might seem weird to people, like I said, like those stat lines like definitely can cause human error, or it can make you waste precious, like, I guess, like tempo or something
yeah,
on dealing with something that you don't really want to deal with at that moment.
instead of taking out the Daisy Duck, you're now wasting a turn to take out the Prince. So
Yep, exactly.
it can just be a pure tempo ruiner. So
Oh yeah.
let's move on to the last card of our highlighted stuff, and it is Tramp, the 7 drop Inkable. We finally got an Inkable card on this list. Let's go.
Yep.
Inkable 2/6, that quest for 2. And the effects are for each character you have in play, you may pay 1 less to play this character. 7 cost Inkable, so keep that in mind. And the second effect is when you play this character, you may draw a card for each other character you have in play, then choose and discard that many cards.
Okay. So this other card I wanted to talk about, because this card was also ran in the same Emerald Amber list, and then I've tested this card. I've tested against people that use this card, and this card is actually better than what it seems when you first glance at it. Because if you were
Okay.
to glance at the card, you would just think, "Oh, 7 drop 2/6 that quest for 2."
Yeah.
It'll take too long to get out.
It dies the brawl.
Yeah, Dice Medusa, Dice Medusa. And,
Yep.
like,
That's it.
so, but the crazy thing about this card is, like, in aggro decks, you get this card out way faster than
Yep.
turn 7. You're getting this out by like turn 3, turn 4. It's pretty nuts because at that stage in the game when you're aggro and you have a big like we talked about the Prince being a 0/5, this thing is a 2/6.
Yep.
And
That's
then
questing
not
for 2.
yeah, and then not only that is like if you still have a lot of and you draw the amount of cards that you have on the board, and by that time, if you're only paying like 2 extra lore to get this thing out, you're drawing 5 cards and getting rid of 5 cards. Being able to cycle through your deck like that just to grab more characters
Yep.
can be insane in terms of the comboing you can get out of this deck in terms of putting more characters on the board the following turns.
And I didn't even think about it, but you can draw 5 cards. If you're the best player in the world, you're going to draw 2 Lilos. You're going to
Yep.
discard the Lilos and you're going to slam down the new Prince 2 drop bodyguard and then play the Lilos your next turn because you're the best. So, like,
Exactly. And then with all those discarding characters, you can play the Chernobog in this deck as well.
yep.
And so imagine playing a Chernobog that's basically completely free, or you're only paying 1 or 2 the following turn after that. So this
Yep.
deck is more nuts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pointing out the Chernobog, especially against Steel Blue, you don't have very many ways to deal with it. And so Chernobog can be ruthless, especially if it comes out super early.
Yeah.
Um, if you're not running Let It Go or you got double Zeus or something and you don't have your I'm hitting my lucky dime for 18 lore in 1 turn yet, like you might be struggling. So
Yeah. Out of all the decks that I've played with the Steel Blue list, this one has caused me the most trouble by far.
no, that's good to hear because we need people to know that the steel blue item list can lose. Because
Yeah.
after week 1 of the set being out, everyone is doom and glooming, pretending this is the Thanos of Lorcana and it's just gonna ruin the game forever. So
Yeah, and granted, I'm not Zan or his homies that be like that was born with this list and know the ins and outs of like the exact playlines and stuff. But like the way I was crushed, uh, bro, was like it was insane. Like, yeah, this like for the rest of the field, the non top professional players using the blue steel list is not,
Mhm.
yeah, like you said, it's not as doom and gloom as
Yeah.
people think.
No, there's definitely skill gap to every deck. It's just it's good to know that like these decks have gaps, and it makes sense why an aggro list is gonna go so hard in the beginning of a set. They always do. Um, so I definitely recommend picking up some of these aggro cards that he's talking about. If you are
Mhm.
struggling against the blue steel list or like a heavy item combo, ruby sapphire. Um, the aggro decks don't always do the best against Steel Song, so if people run Steel Song like crazy at your local meta, like it's not gonna might not be the best pickup. But if you're struggling against those decks, I definitely recommend looking into it and trying it out and see what you can do. A lot of the aggro pieces are very cheap as well, so it's a very beginner friendly pickup. So
Oh yeah, and because when talking about aggro, like especially with last set with Azrite C set, like people thought it was going to be doom and gloom with Ruby Sapphire. Then
yep,
Artemis came out with his green purple aggro list, and they completely opened up the format.
yep.
And so I think the same thing can happen here with Amber Emerald.
Oh yeah. No, there is definitely some decks with legs. It's just gonna take people to experiment and figure out the decks. RIP Ruby Am players. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
They've had enough time in the sun.
Yeah,
Uh,
they had 4 sets of running it. So um it's just
yeah.
people need to experiment. You should experiment. Everyone should experiment. Play cards, man. You don't have to go online and just always play the best stuff. You can go in your room, play test some cards, see what's good, see what's terrible. It's okay to lose, it's okay to win, it's okay to play whatever you want. Like
Mhm.
if
Yeah.
you think a card is good, try it. If you think a card is terrible, you don't have to try it. Like it's terrible, you know?
Exactly. Like no one like I would say the biggest surprise moment that I think that the community as a whole had was when I guess Joshua Poultry won Atlanta with the yellow purple deck, and
Yep.
everyone looked at his deck list and everyone was like, why is he running the fairy godmother package in a Cinderella with no songs?
Yep.
And people then realized, be like, okay, it's not the most popular cards, but how can you make these cards synergize with each other?
How can you
And
play them?
exactly, and then if all these people right now are focused only on Sapphire Steel, Ruby Sapphire, there's a chance that you could come up with a deck or some type of combo that synergizes real well that can work against these decks.
Yep. And we see that all the time too. Like I like Zach Bivens a lot. He's a great player. And he's notorious for also just making strange decks or playing whatever's the best deck is in the room. He tries not to play that. He tries to play something else that'll beat that deck. And it's pretty cool because it's nice having a top player like that consistently do that. And then you have people like DKP who play one of the top decks, and he's like, "I'm gonna make my own version of it." And he found a hole in the meta where he's able to play locations. You know what I mean? And PS locations right now will go very well.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
there was someone in top 16 or top 32 at the 10 case who played Ruby Am. Golf clap for you. You played Ruby Am, and you had a very fairy ship one drop location. I'm sure it went insane. I'm sure it was amazing. So I also saw a Steel Song list with some locations in there as well. That it just there's so much room with how slow some of these decks are to get free lore from these locations, and they can't handle it. Like they can't out these cards. So experiment, dude. Have fun. Like play new stuff.
Yeah.
Locations have a big opening right now. Bodyguards can have a big opening right now. Like it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and definitely like because I know we touched on these blue steel cards, and I definitely think now that everyone knows about this initial blue steel list that we'll get into, it's gonna end up getting changed because
Yeah.
now we're gonna have to deal with mirrors and things of that nature.
hmm And
Yeah.
like Cogsworth alone might get thrown back into the list just due to
Mhm.
like if Steel Blue is the best deck. what wins the mirror match in Steel Blue? What did we used to see? It was always Cogsworth. Whoever got one or
Yeah.
two Cogsworths down first. And what happens when Cogsworth is in the meta? Red decks just get to start running around a little more because they just body Cogsworth. Like so,
Mhm.
it's inevitable, the evolving door of the meta. So let's jump into the 10Ks real quick. We're already at an hour or so
Yeah.
into the podcast, so I just want to talk about this a little bit. We don't have to deep dive the list. I think we'll save that for another video. But I just want to talk about a few of the top players and what they played.
Okay.
So let me pull it up, not on Discord, so they can see your webcam. 1 second. All right, so first place was Jeremy playing Steel Sapphire, and second place was Jonathan playing Ruby Sapphire. Two blue decks, similar strategies as well. It was a cool finals to watch. I have loved items since set one started the game. Blue has always been, I've always been drawn to blue, like Fishbone Quill is crazy. Uh, for me now, though, I'm not a big fan of playing Fishbone, so I tried the second place list and I wasn't a huge fan of it. But the first place list is the list you have been playing for at least the last week. So I want to hear your thoughts on just a quick summary of what you think of the first place list.
Okay, so I tried I tried this exact list, and I've also tried the older build of the list because there's actually an older build or a different build that someone had where instead of the T-pos they ran scuttles.
Yep.
Um, and I found that this deck, if you watch any of the games, it basically plays exactly like how on the games. It's incredibly slow starting out. Like, and because of that, there's a lot of chances for other decks to run under you and throw you off the initial game plan. And then with the mirrors, it can be a little rough too, because in the mirror, they know exactly your opponent knows exactly what you're playing, essentially. And with how weak the foundation is, and this deck is basically Oswald, that can basically run you off course as well because they can just do the popsicle, the bell to sing a song to get rid of your Oswald.
Yep.
There's a lot of situations where you can be slowed down and it causes you to go into basically double digit turns with these games and then even go to time.
Yep.
And I did a league on a Monday night and where every single round basically went to time because there's the amount of turns where it's like, and keep in mind I was being mindful of the speed of my play because I noticed these turns take a while. And even with me being mindful and playing at a little faster pace, the game still basically went to time where there was like 2 minutes left, then it was about to go to time,
Yep.
or it was turn one of time, then we finally finished. And it can really hurt, especially if you're playing against the mirror match or if you're playing against inexperienced players who are just taking long to think on their side. I ran into a league night yesterday, in fact, where I didn't even get to finish my round because the other player kept taking too long to think. And they're kind of a newer player, so it's always rough trying to, call a slow play. And
Find
plus
the
it's a league.
balance. Yeah.
Yeah, and plus it's a league night, so it's like you don't want to go too neckbeard or too sweaty on him.
Yeah.
So like it puts you in a lot of situations like that. And then also I watched a couple other people play and the deck really struggles against locations. I saw a specific matchup. I saw this deck list go against DKP's Ruby Sapphire location deck list. And I found out that the Ruby Sapphire player was prioritizing locations. Like they didn't care what they had on the board. Turn four, manner. Turn
Exactly.
five, manner. Like turn six, another manner. It's just like when you're overwhelming them with large body locations, it significantly slows the deck down
Yep.
to the point where it's like, okay, the opposing player might win just because of the locations being on board and not any other factors at all. So this deck, but the good thing about this deck is like when you go first or when you get on a roll, like this deck absolutely crushes.
Mm,
And the inclusion of the Scrooge McDuck, I feel like that's the one, like, because people talk about Tamatoa, and that's a good card, respectfully. And although he is the higher price legendary, I feel like Scrooge, in my opinion, is the better card, especially when you already have your 4 items in play and you can play it for free.
yep.
Because you can absolutely sing Zeus with this card or any of the songs in this deck. And then you can basically scry for another item from the top four, which basically adds on to the train of items, playing more items, to
Yep.
drawing cards, to playing more items. And then being a 4/4 body, it takes out the opposing player's bell, and then it can take out a fox. It survives the bell trade, it survives the Smee trade. And so essentially, you're able to have a quote unquote protected body on board that can challenge, because it only quests for one, and so that is the downside. So in my opinion, I use Scrooge more for the singing and challenging when it was already on the board,
Yep.
more for questing because of the stats on it. But
No, that makes sense.
yeah, but like overall, like once you get to near the end of like you having all your items on board, the kill shot is insane because you can throw a Tamatoa out and you don't even need to wait till the next turn to quest. You can basically dime your way to victory that same
Yep.
turn.
You're
And so
getting
that's
18
where
lore in a turn. Like
yeah.
we used
That's
to
where
think
the
hitting
deck is
Tamatoa
insane.
for like 8 was crazy, and now it's you can legit hit him. You can quest and hit him for you can do 18 lore in a turn, like for free,
Yeah.
pretty much. So
It's nuts because
and
by the time you throw them out, you basically have enough items to basically get you to victory or like one or two lore away.
yep.
And so yeah, the deck is nuts. Um I just want to know where it's gonna go from here because this deck was basically a surprise to everyone when people didn't know it was coming, but now that everyone
Exactly.
know it's here, like we mentioned earlier, location decks are gonna become a big thing. Aggro decks are gonna become a big thing, and then this deck is gonna have a target on his back. So
Yep.
I'm wondering how this deck evolves. And I think the hot take is that I don't. This deck is a hot deck of the set right now. I actually think it's gonna be a different deck that takes the crown of being the best deck by the end of the set.
Yeah, I think it had the surprise factor, minus like 2 of the better cards in the set of Scrooge and
Yeah.
Tamatoa. But it had the surprise factor of holy crap, like they're playing an item OTK deck. You know what I mean? Like they're hitting
Yeah.
Tamatoa for 18. But I was talking to you about at locals about how this list was already a thing last set. Like
Yeah.
this list, everything was pretty much the same, minus the Scrooge and the Bell. Like you can count the new Tamatoa, but like relatively speaking, the old Tamatoa and hitting it with the dime for X amount of items, that was always people were always trying that list. Like so people, I'm sure, will figure out a way. It's just
Yeah.
more like can these other decks and these other colors hang with the amount of juice that blue got this set? I think that's the bigger question. So
Yeah, and like you had mentioned how this deck existed a couple sets ago. Like I feel like this deck absolutely could have survived last set because there wasn't much steel going on last set if I recall because it was mainly sapphire ruby and green purple. Um and so I think what happened was in the before last set came out, people were still so focused on the Diablo combo, and then using the Let the Storm Rage On to get rid of a potential Oswald that it killed the potential of this deck before it even had a chance to shine.
yep.
And so, yeah, you're right. This deck could have existed last set, and if it did, maybe the beginning of this set takes a different turn because this deck would no longer be a surprise.
Cause let's think of last set. Um if you if You realize like you can fly under the people who are focusing trying to trade and take out genies as much as people were. You could have played this deck just due to the
Hmm.
amount of like tech and flex spots that got used to fight and trade with genies alone. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of stuff there. But one thing that pushed this deck over the edge was now having the turn one Cindy style play. Because if you have the win more condition of you have turn one pop or Fortisphere, you get a pop it for the bell, and now you have a singer, your 3/3 Cinderella. It makes sense why this deck can be so explosive, and it is so explosive. Because if you can't answer that and you can't answer the Oswald on two, like the deck is just crazy. So talk about the second place list real quick.
Okay.
It was the red blue version of the item deck, pretty much.
Yes.
I play tested this deck a decent amount. I actually took a very similar list of this to locals, minus I didn't play the bells, and I had two sharks in there. And
Mm.
if I don't feel like you should split and play, you should either go all in on the items, very similar to the second place list, or play more of the shark build with all the actions and stuff. I was just guessing on our local meta that could get away with playing both, mostly because I wanted to try both, and it actually worked out pretty well. I think next week I'm gonna try this item build and see how I like it. Red blue is my favorite deck. I will always love this deck. I love playing all the different versions of it. I've learned the least enjoyable one for me is the DKP list.
Mm.
I like interacting more with my opponent in the sense of playing Sisus and like, I mean, I say interacting as I'm just taking their stuff out, but like, I like playing characters and like doing a lot more in that sense. But the
Yeah.
DKP list went ham for me last set during set champ season, so I can't hate on that deck at all. It's amazing. Um, this item
Yeah.
list is awesome though. The unconventional tool is very slept on, I want to say. I don't know if it's slept on. Me personally, I didn't even think about it when the set came out. And then I played it and I was like, okay, this is awesome playing a pop for free and stuff like that. Banishing it with the higher room and then playing a Fortisphere, and then you get to use the Fortisphere or not Fortisphere, Vitalisphere effect. Like it's great.
Yeah, that was like honestly because I don't play Ruby Sapphire like that. And so when I look at these cards, when I look at this deck list, I get kind of confused. But I did watch the match go on between first and second place, and I saw these cards being used. And it's definitely I feel like this particular deck with the item build is more skill intensive than the
Yes.
blue sapphire steel item build because especially with stuff like the unconventional tool and popping that at the right time so you can play another item for free and continue using the rest of your ink to play a character or something like that,
Yep.
it can definitely get more overwhelming than just a sapphire steel where you're playing an item and then you can pay ink to draw a card.
I also being a red blue player, I genuinely feel like red blue is usually like probably the best deck in the room, like almost always. But the issue is the deck can brick very hard, like very hard. And if you brick, it's terrible. The deck is just awful. So like you watched me at locals, I bricked so hard against Steel Aggro Blue, and it was impossible to win. So I feel like it's a double-edged sword, and especially in a build like this, it even becomes more of a double-edged sword because if you're not able to draw more cards, you're not going to filter cards as easily as you would in like the TKP list, where you have visions and develop your brain, and the grammatas. Like you're not filtering as cards as easily in this list. So this list I feel like is way more unforgiving, and you need to play properly in practice to understand the actual play lines.
Yeah, because this one it's so crazy how well I'm pretty sure like Zan talked to and his group talked to Jonathan Williams because I think they're pretty cool. So it's not surprising how both of them landed on Maurice's workshop
Yep.
for their builds. I'm the card I'm most interested in this deck list is the 9-drop Bell because I know a lot of people like basically threw her off because she was a 9 cost with a 7 shift, and although
Yeah.
the effect is good, um,
It can be
I
slow.
yes. And I don't think it'll get used a lot. I think it'll be a lot of ink instead of actual play.
She also quests for 3, which is awesome, and she has 2 shift targets on 2 viable cards, being the Bell 1 drop, 3 drop, and also the 4 drop that can quest for 5. Obviously, we always have the complaint of the card is not played, the 4 drop Bell, just due to she dies to Brawl, like that
Yeah.
alone. But so does every card in every list now, so take it how you want.
Yeah.
Um, it's more if you can afford the 4 drop spot. She's awesome, and also I just looked it up. Marissa's Workshop foils are now $22 as of recording of this video.
You know what's crazy is that I think last night they were like $17 for a foil, and
Sounds
so
about right.
yeah.
I would like to point out, I picked mine up a month and a half ago for $2 each, so I'm very
Oh
proud of
man, I
myself.
goofed. I goofed.
So,
I mean, the
uh,
only smart play I did was picking up a playset of Forest Spheres for like 50 cents each.
yeah,
And now they're like I think they were at 25, but I think they
yeah.
dropped back
I
down
think
to
they're
like 8 or
stabilized.
something.
Yeah, they're probably somewhere around the pops, like 8 to 15 bucks.
Yeah.
Um, I know the rest of these lists I'm not gonna go over because our video is already way too long. But I'm just gonna go say there was a steel discard list in Top Cut. They didn't run Zeus, they ran Bruno and all the other good discard stuff, including Lucifer. And I've been playtesting Lucifer. He is awesome. I never thought I'd say that, but he is awesome. And it destroys purple decks. So if your local metal has a ton of purple, try a discard. It might be absolutely amazing for you. You just got to practice the curve plays. Like you need to know when to shift, what cards to shift when, what songs to sing when. There's a lot of practice there, so you need to practice those play lines before you just show up and hope you win all 4 games. So
Yeah.
um, there is also a steel purple list in top 8. It was pretty much last set steel purple list with Doc and the libraries. All they had in there that was new was the giant cobras at 4. So uh, keep that in mind. Giant cobra, we were talking about it. Keep an eye on it. Card's insane. I messed up and didn't get my foils. They're already like $12, I think. So
Yeah, I didn't either.
so I'm not getting foils of those. Most likely, I
Yeah.
have like 1 or 2. So there was also in 7th place green yellow aggro list, kind of what you were talking about with the Chernobygs. They don't have the bodyguard in there though, the 2 drop. So
Okay.
but green, yellow, people were bashing it before the set came out, saying, "Why would they print these cards? They're not that good." And here you have someone in the 10Ks actually getting top cut and doing very well with the list. So, if you want to play aggro, that might be one of your better options this set.
Yeah.
And
Um,
then in 8th place, we have the Kiwi Birds style aggro list for Steel Blue. So there's if there's a deck you want to play, realistically, you can pull up and play it most likely, besides Ruby Amethyst. But I'm
yeah.
sure Ed will prove us all wrong and win the event with
Yeah,
Ruby Am.
I
So
think that I think Ruby Amethyst will get figured out in a sense.
yeah,
I definitely think I think a location based Ruby Amethyst will end up being, I guess,
pretty
their
strong,
version strong deck of the color combo.
especially with the
Um,
burn cards, just gain lore. So
yeah, and then it's just well in the Skivvy list that you had mentioned, I definitely think the Alice card can cause some trouble if you play your play lines right. Some of these other decks,
mhm.
still only because like if anything that's not running the B prep or the board clear like the big Sisu, it's gonna have a rough time against these warded characters.
Yep.
And having the Kiwi list with the Alice and then the locations now with the McDuck Manors, I think can cause some issues.
Oh yeah, McDuck is. You can say whatever you want about McDuck, but the moment it's played against you and you see that 9 willpower and you don't have a hideaway, you're just like, yeah, I don't know how I deal with that. So,
It's insane
uh,
how it's 9 willpower
yeah,
too, like and
and
gaining 2
inkable.
lore. Yeah, it's nuts.
Um, nah, so don't don't be afraid if you can't afford or don't want to play or don't have the cards to play steel blue items. Um, because for example, the Kiwi Birds aggro list is still alive and well, and it's much cheaper. You
Mhm.
can play green yellow aggro, which I'm sure is probably legit a super cheap deck. Minus the Rapunzels. Rapunzels are in that list, and they are
Yeah.
expensive. I understand that. Steel purple is also a great option and also pretty cheap minus the strength of a raging fire. Um, Actually, I guess Calhoun's in that range too, right? Of like 8 to 10 bucks now.
Yeah, I think so. But I think out of all these lists, I think the Amethyst Steel is the cheapest.
So yeah, there's options, and especially if you already have staples, steel purple might be one of the cheaper ways to go if you already have the staple cards for that. Because if you don't have the
Yeah.
bounce package yet, get it.
Oh yeah, especially with more and more sets coming out, where you're gonna start seeing less and less of the older sets.
Yep,
So if you want to get the staples of like the set one and set two stuff now before you try to get like the more newer stuff, just so you can have those staples of the older sets.
yep. So that's gonna be it for the podcast. I know in the future ones, I'm gonna want to talk on. I don't know if we'll do it for a podcast actually, but I do want to do a market watch style video. Um, we've done pretty well at predicting cards that'll shoot up in price, so I feel like we can keep doing that and incentivize people who also are curious or want to buy foils, and stuff like that. I don't really flip cards. I don't sell cards for money or anything like that, but I do
Uh,
enjoy playing with foils. So I like to get them
yeah.
when they're cheap, and I like to see them when they go up in price because it means my collection is worth more, even though I don't really sell cards like that. Um, I also want to get some guests on the podcast and have their thoughts and input on stuff. And I know in future videos, Jeffrey and I are both going to be doing deck profiles and talking about combos and little things of. We might even do little gameplay clips of he was talking about the Prince bodyguard. We could do in-game cut and show like a play line where the Prince bodyguard blows out a game and wins the game for the player, and also when you can play that card and it was a terrible decision. So I think little videos like that will help people a lot and see different ins and outs of different decks, even if they don't play the colorways. So,
Yeah,
um,
like yeah, it's good to like even if you don't play a colorway, it's good to know what the other colorways are
yep,
doing. So if you ever go against it, or if you decide to play it with yourself, you have an idea of what's going on.
yep. So I appreciate you guys watching, listening, however you guys found the video or the audio. We do have a Discord. I'm gonna put it in the description of the video. We're gonna start getting it active in here and trying to have games. We'll do Discord games. We can play test online on the client that we won't say. As well as Tabletop Simulator. We might eventually even throw like a weird weekly league in here or something through Discord and stuff like that. So, hope to talk to you guys. If you guys have any input, please let us know. I'm sure this will be scuffed for our first few videos, but we'd love to hear and see what you guys would like. So, thank you guys for watching
Hey, thank y'all for watching.
and take care, guys.
Peace.